But the truth is that bridges in this world are greater than heroes, you know? And I know it's hard to digest or to really believe, but maybe you were meant to be with this person. Or if we're talking about a friendship, you were meant to be friends with this person for just that period in that person's life or your life. And that's it, not a day more and not a day less. And to make sense of it, or else you will feel that it was a waste of time, is to realize that you were a bridge.
Feels like I'm going to lose my mind. You just keep on pushing my love over the borderline.
Man, that song, I don't know if there's anything that brings you back faster than a song. And that song, Borderline by Madonna, snaps me right back into the 80s. I think I was like 10. Anyway, I've been scared recently because in the last 3 or 4 days, I've been having waves of nausea. And one of my biggest fears in this life is vertigo. So, vertigo is when the world starts spinning. It could get so bad that like you could throw up and you're like completely, I just imagine if you're like, it feels like you're in a plane tail spinning downward to earth. Feeling nausea and dizziness has got to be the worst feelings. I mean, to me, for some people, it might be hunger. I don't know. But to me, that a human can experience is just constant nausea. And it makes me think about all the women who have been pregnant and all that morning sickness. Oh, anyway, I've been having waves of nausea and I don't know where it's coming from, but holy shit, I'm just on pins because I'm scared. It's like I'm gonna go through vertigo. The other fear I have is kidney stones. Speaking of borderline, when I was like 10, my aunt, I witnessed her having kidney stones being rushed out of our house on a stretcher because I guess it was so bad. We called 911. Paramedics came and she was screaming and holding onto my dad's hand and so scared. And I just remember what is going on. And she had kidney stones. I think because of that, I've just been terrified about having kidney stones. And both vertigo and kidney stones are things that you can't really predict, right? That's the other thing that's scary about them. They could come at any time. Anyway, all right. I wanted to read something to you. I want to read this to you because I posted it this morning and I was like, oh, I think so many people can get something out of this. It's from my new book. And I wrote it for therapists, but then I was thinking it's actually for anyone. All right, listen to this. Sometimes you're not supposed to be the hero. You're the placeholder, the bridge, the handrail someone leans on until they can walk without collapsing. You're not there to carry them across the finish line. You're there to keep them from falling off the edge until they're ready to move on. I know it's thankless work. You feel invisible, possibly used, but bridges matter. Without them, people stay stranded, including yourself. I want to remind you today that there's always an exchange. When you collide with someone, two people get something from that collision, right? Assuming you're willing to look at and review the collision, what's come up, process it, right? If you don't do any of that, then yeah, I mean, chances are you might just leave with resentment and there's no return. One of the ways to find meaning after a breakup, if you're going through a breakup, or maybe you went through a breakup years ago and there's still residue, one of the ways to find meaning and to turn your breakup into a breakthrough is to actually look at what came up for you through this exchange, that this person was also a bridge for you to walk toward a new version of yourself, to walk toward parts of yourself you have not discovered, you know? And I think many people can feel used or like they were the stepping stone. And I get that feeling. But the truth is that bridges in this world are greater than heroes, you know? And I know it's hard to digest or to really believe, but maybe you were meant to be with this person. Or if we're talking about a friendship, you were meant to be friends with this person for just that period in that person's life or your life. And that's it, not a day more and not a day less. And to make sense of it, or else you will feel that it was a waste of time, is to realize that you were a bridge, you know? And maybe you were there to help them through something, but also if you look inward, there was something that they gave you. And it may be hard to look at, right? There was something in that exchange that activated you. There might have been projection, there might have been something you learned from the friendship or dating this person for 3 months or the situationship or even the marriage. But there's something in this for you if you have the courage to really look honestly at yourself and what comes up. If you don't, you're not going to believe that you were a bridge or that they were a bridge. You're going to feel like that was a big tragedy in your life. You feel like you wish that you never met this person, right? And many people do after a breakup. And by feeling that way, there's going to be no closure. It's always going to be the dark cloud that follows you. One of my biggest relationships was my marriage. If you know my story, I talk about it often. It was one of the biggest imprints because I got married at 29, got divorced at I was 35. We were together for 5 years. The marriage was 5 years, but we also dated 5 years before that. So the whole thing was like 10 years. And the reason why it was the biggest imprint, and by the way, she left me, so I felt very abandoned, used, discarded. Tons of feelings afterwards. But in looking back, the way I got closure and I continued to get closure, and by the way, I don't think closure, the word closure is, I think, is misleading because it's not like you're closing a door and that door never opens. I think this idea that you go through a breakup and then you just close that door and it's gone. I think it's ridiculous. It's not possible. I think we continue to close as we continue to heal, and I think that's okay. I talk about my divorce. It was a significant part of my life because I've learned so much from it, but I don't like dwell on it. I'm not thinking about it every single day. Right. But of course, I mean, it's been almost 20 years. And yeah, I still think about it once in a while. Right. But I don't think about it in terms of like, I want to go back to it. I think about it as in what I've learned from it. I am still connecting dots. Right. I'm still putting things together, looking at the marriage from different lenses. And I may be doing that for the rest of my life. That's just the power of two people colliding, loving, learning, growing. And of course, that wasn't my only relationship. I've been in many relationships. And so I reflect on relationships that come up naturally, right? That I'm reminded of. And I think that's okay. What's important is that you don't live there, right? Anyway, so what I'm saying is, or what I was saying about the getting closure about that marriage, if I didn't see her entering my life and us colliding, and because of the divorce, it forced me to go on my hero's journey and cross that great divide from boy to man. And many people around me today may disagree. It is subjective, but I was a total boy. And if there wasn't for the divorce, I think I still would be, The divorce was the call to action or call to adventure. It was the inciting incident, right? It was the act break. It was me forced to go on my eat, pray, love journey. And as they say, find myself and to be less of a miserable fuck, to be single on purpose, basically the title of all my books, and come back to the village changed. If it wasn't for that collision, if it wasn't for us meeting, loving, divorcing, I wouldn't be who I am today. And so when I look at it that way, I feel like that was meant. And whether she was the bridge for me or I was the bridge for her, there were no heroes, right? I don't look at it like someone saved anyone. I look at it as we were bridges for each other. And, the other way to look at bridges is also because it could go both ways, it being a path to your past, right? Speaking of connecting dots, when you meet someone and you start learning from the person, you can also use that bridge to walk back to old parts of you and what happened and why, and to rediscover or maybe discover for the first time who you were. I think it's one of the most powerful things about love, relationships, breakups, and that word breakup still, I just, it's such a traumatic, devastating title, and that's why I tend to use expired relationship. Anyway, if you're going through one now, every breakup or expired relationship is a reset button you didn't want to press. It forces you to stop outsourcing your worth to someone else and start owning it. It's not about moving on, it's about moving into yourself, into who you really are when no one's reflecting you back. I think it's one of the hardest things about a relationship is when you're in a relationship, the other person is constantly reflecting you back, you know? And that's why they say every relationship is a mirror, even with your children, even with friends. A breakup isn't just about loss, it's about exposure, the cracks, the shadows, the dormant piece of you that only surface when something you leaned on is no longer there. It's an invitation to ask yourself, who am I without them? Let me just pause real quick with that. That question alone, that simple question, who am I without them? If you answer that honestly, there's your prescription. There's your prescription, you know? Especially if you've been in a long term relationship or marriage. I didn't have the answer to that question after my divorce, but it is something that I asked myself, and it is the question that became the rudder of my life. It was what pushed me into the direction of where I went. Who am I without this person? Because in my marriage, I was, I'm not going to say her name, but I was her husband. I was known as her husband. I didn't have an identity. I wasn't successful. She was more popular. She was more everything. And so I was just the guy that was married to her. And so when the bottom fell out and she left, I was standing there asking myself, like, who am I? And I feel like that's one of the, who am I without this person? That it's one of the most important, I think, first questions you should ask yourself when you're coming out of a relationship. What was I outsourcing to this relationship that now I have to own myself? Oh, were you outsourcing worth? What were you outsourcing that now you have to own yourself? I feel like these are the kind of questions that, as you continue to answer them, your connection to self will grow, your story will unfold, and you will have more sense of self. And that's part of this whole closure chapter, you know? Profound pain always carries profound instruction. Breakups slash expired relationships teach you that attachment and identity are fragile, but resilience is not. They remind you that endings aren't the opposite of beginnings. Endings are beginnings. You know, it's like that whole idea that life is a circle, right? Endings are beginnings. Endings are the door to your beginning. The grief is real, but so is the liberation, the chance to stop living as a character in someone else's script and to author a story that finally feels like your own. What does that look like? What does that look like in action, in thought, in behavior? If I can give you any piece of instruction, if I can give you a step one, and even if you're not going through a breakup, but maybe you are trying to reset, maybe you are repositioning, reevaluating, you know, maybe you're shaking your life edge to sketch and you kind of want to start over, even if you're not technically starting over in life, right? I think many should do this. We tend to do it every year as like a New Year's thing, but I think we should do this more often. This whole idea of connecting to yourself. I talk a lot about the pseudo self for the and versus the solid self, and I tattooed both on my arm. And I don't think we can be in our solid self 100% of the time, but I do think most of us live in our pseudo. So one of my big first steps when I was going through my rebirth was, where in my life am I in my pseudo self? Where am I exchanging truth for membership? I'm sorry if you've heard that a million times from me, but I will constantly remind myself in the world that do not exchange your truth for membership like I did for most of my 20s and 30s. Because when you do, whatever that thing you are trading is for whatever membership, maybe it's to be a part of someone else's life. Maybe it's, I don't know, selling your soul for money, like whatever it is. That is the fastest way to live a life that is outside in instead of inside out. That is the fastest way to be in a state of pseudo. So what you do is you ask yourself, where in your life, from the time you get up to when you go to sleep, where in your life do you feel that tug? Like, who's around you? What are you doing? You know, one quick note, something can be solid self in your life, like truth. For example, in my life, screenwriting was my solid self. It was my truth for many years. And then the same thing started to become pseudo. It started to become pseudo when I was trying to be a screenwriter, not because I loved it, because I thought that that was my ticket to success or being a better man or, bringing more to a marriage, whatever it was, right? And so when I didn't love it anymore and I was just doing it to kind of chase the shiny thing, it became pseudo. So I'm using that as an example to tell you that something that was once solid, something that put you in a solid self state can also eventually, that same thing can get you to be pseudo because it's no longer your truth. So, what in your life tugs the most on your pseudo self? Think about work, think about if you're dating someone, or if you're in a relationship, maybe it's your marriage, your relationship with your family. From the time you get up to the time you go to sleep, where in your life are you the most pseudo? I would look at that and then ask yourself what you need to do. What does it look like to pull more from your solid self? And this is an exercise. It's an ongoing exercise, something I still do and will do for the rest of my life. But with it comes alignment. And if you're honest with yourself and you say, okay, this is what I'm going to do because it's going to make me more solid, more connected to self, whether that's raising your hand in the boardroom, maybe it's asking for a raise, maybe it's leaving your husband. I don't know. Or it could be really small things, not picking up the phone, telling your friend that you're no longer going to be the first one there. Or maybe you don't have to announce that. Maybe just do it. But where in your life do you feel the most pseudo and what does it look like to start pulling from your solid self? As you do that, slowly, you will start to build a safer life container for yourself. And in that greenhouse, you will start to build a healthier relationship with yourself, hence connecting to yourself. That is not a one time thing, that is a lifelong journey. But that is where I started. And that is my offer to you today to reset, to realign, and rediscover, connect to who you really are. Thank you for listening. Be well.